World War II. One of the most infamous and destructive periods of human history. A global conflict that spanned 6 years and saw unprecedented advancements in technology, warfare, and communication. But beyond the battles fought on land, sea, and air, the war extended into a battleground of culture and ideology, affecting not only the individuals fighting on the front lines, but the people back home that those individuals were fighting for. And it's here that we see one of the most notorious elements of wartime culture. That of the propaganda film.
Und vergiss nicht, you dogs!
Yes, and we're producing vitamins and food concentrates packed with enough power to bowl over the Axis nation.
Which was Tony led the others, blazing his way through the streets like a one-man army.
In den Jubel mischte sich ein Schrei des Schmerzes und der Empörung.
From documentaries to animated shorts, propaganda films were crafted to inspire enlistment, justify the sacrifices of war, and paint a clear image of good versus evil. While some of the best examples of World War II propaganda films come from America, propaganda was a tactic that was used by every country involved in the conflict. A notable example of this being Japan. During World War II, Japan was obviously a much different country than it is today. During this time, the Japanese government imposed strict regulations on all forms of entertainment. Most forms of media were tightly censored to ensure they promoted nationalism and loyalty to the Japanese emperor. This included radio, newspapers, and of course, films. Japan's film law of 1939 basically restricted studios to producing content that aligned with the government's goals, leading to the rise of Japanese propaganda films. Pieces of work that existed as a means to exemplify Japan's superiority. However, something very interesting about these films is that despite their controversial nature, they actually served as a breeding ground for what would become some of Japan's most influential creators. For example, Eiji Tsuburaya, the special effects director for the original 1954 Godzilla and later creator of Ultraman, was notorious for his contributions to Japanese war propaganda. One of the best examples of this being the film The War at Sea from Hawaii to Malaya, where his depiction of the attack on Pearl Harbor was so realistic it actually fooled people into believing it was real footage. Propaganda films were a normal occurrence for Japan at this point, and among these works, believe it or not, were early anime. Across the globe, animation was no stranger to propaganda. For instance, it wasn't out of the ordinary to see beloved Disney and Looney Tunes cartoons like Donald and Daffy Duck being in the same cartoon as Adolf Hitler. It's a lot easier to get your message across when that message is being delivered by iconic and well-known characters. What's very interesting, however, is that these same characters being used by America to promote their propaganda films were actively being mocked in Japanese propaganda films, even before World War II. For example, look at this short film from 1937 titled, and I kid you not, Evil Mickey Mouse Invades Japan, where Mickey Mouse, in this film a representation of oppressive American will, invades Japan and is fought back by Japan's most beloved and iconic characters like Isomboshi and Kintaro. In the context of the modern day, it's definitely weird to see, but a lot of this was just normal back then. However, if you want to talk about early Japanese propaganda, it's impossible to do so without bringing up what is probably the most infamous, as well as one of the most iconic pieces of Japanese animation ever created: Momotaro, Sacred Sailors. The Momotaro animations, directed by Japanese animator Mitsuyo Seo, to this day are considered keystones in the history of anime. That being said, they're also very, very strange. The first to debut was Momotaro's Sea Eagles, a 37-minute short film endorsed by the Japanese Imperial Navy. Like many propaganda films at the time, the short film centered on a beloved pop culture icon. In this instance, the popular folklore character Momotaro, the Peach Boy. Momotaro is a staple of Japanese culture, the same way that characters like Robin Hood are celebrated in Western society. Traditionally, Momotaro represents bravery and righteousness, and is often depicted as a hero who defeats evil and protects the weak. Here, however, Momotaro is reimagined as a righteous soldier leading an army of animal companions as they conduct an attack on Pearl Harbor. To put it lightly, it's surreal to watch, but at the same time, it was very impressive when you take into account what was coming out of Japan at the time. And so, knowing how skillful Seo was at animation, he was commissioned to make a sequel to Momotaro's Sea Eagles. And it was that sequel that would become the first feature-length anime film ever made: Momotaro, Sacred Sailors. Watching this film in the modern day is bizarre. The film itself is incredibly beautiful, and within historical context, it's a mind-blowing feat of skill in animation when you consider the standards for Japanese animation at the time. The backgrounds are magnificent, and the animation is smooth and filled with life, something only accentuated by the adorable anthropomorphic animal characters that populate the film's world. Sacred Sailors is a spectacular feat of filmmaking. However, as you watch, it's impossible to shake the unsettling feeling that the film was made with a darker purpose. The cute anthropomorphic animals, they're tools of manipulation, carefully crafted to appeal to children and subtly encourage loyalty to the Japanese Empire. On the surface, it all seems like a children's fantasy, but it's not long before you realize that these lovable creatures are being used to rally support for the military. This is just my perspective from watching this film, but during the early parts of the story, it feels like there's this odd dread in the air. All of these happy animals are going about their lives and celebrating the fact that some of their own are going to be going to war soon and defending their empire, as if none of them know the horrors that war entails and the inevitable destruction that will befall them. Of course, that's not how the film goes. All the characters are very optimistic throughout and constantly singing happy songs as they build bunkers and prepare military rations. Which, by the way, seeing a bunch of cartoon rabbits and monkeys parachute down into enemy lines and begin to arm themselves with assault rifles is almost like experiencing a fever dream. It's just very humorous and surreal to see these characters who in one instant are smiling, singing, and sharing their rations with each other, to then turn around and start single-handedly dispatching heavily armored British tanks. And speaking of the British, they're not exactly depicted in the best light here. It has always been a staple of propaganda films across the globe to paint the opposing side as unflatteringly as possible. And this film is no exception, depicting the British as bumbling caricatures symbolizing their supposed weakness and inferiority, further emphasized by the incredibly goofy English voiceover as they're pressured by the Japanese forces to surrender.
Yes, sir, yes. We agreed to unconditional surrender. Yes, certainly. Unconditional surrender. Yes.
The film closes as we see a group of children pretending to play parachute, landing on a chalk outline of the continental United States, implying the target for the next generation of soldiers. And that is how we leave things off. Sacred Sailors is a vicious, manipulative film, but at the same time, it's weirdly beautiful. Early anime was very cheaply made and often had trouble competing with imported Western films like Cinderella or Fantasia. Japanese animators basically worked with scrap, so to see a film like this of this technical quality was kind of a miracle at the time. It's the definition of a paradox, even more so when you take into account the director, Mitsuyo Seo. Despite creating a film that served the Japanese war effort, Seo himself was known for his pacifist views. It's a tragic irony that in order for him to achieve his artistic vision, he had to do so under the constraints of a propaganda machine he likely didn't believe in. Seo's creative talents were essentially commandeered by the government, and in a sense, was only allowed to create art so long as it promoted something that went against his own principles. Yet, within this difficult position, Seo still found a way to push the boundaries of Japanese animation and create something beautiful. It's this duality that makes Momotaro Sacred Sailors so fascinating. On one hand, it's a product of war, a tool of manipulation designed to inspire nationalism and militarism in children. But on the other hand, it's a technical masterpiece that pushed the medium of anime forward in ways no one else had at the time. Seo's influences are even more paradoxical when you realize that despite the film's obvious anti-American message, his work was heavily inspired by American cartoons. And the techniques he used in Momotaro, such as the multiplane camera and the fluid expressive character designs, were clearly influenced by Western animation, creating a strange contrast between the film's intent and its inspiration. Although this film was designed to inspire in negative ways, In the end, it did inspire people in positive ways as well. For example, the legendary anime and manga creator Osamu Tezuka said that he was moved to tears when he watched this film, saying that underneath its blatant propaganda was a film about dreams and hopes, and that he saw the potential of Japanese animation to tell complex emotional stories. And in that sense, Seiyu's work transcended its origins. Despite its unsettling message, the film has been celebrated for its technical achievements, proving that even something born from a darker intent can be appreciated for its beauty. In the end, despite how weird this movie is to watch, I think Seiyu was able to create something he could be proud of, even if the circumstances of its creation were fraught with contradiction. Momotaro, Sacred Sailors remains a symbol of the complexities of art during wartime. While it was meant to serve an evil purpose, I still think Seiyu's talent shines through, and many have come to see it not just as propaganda, but as a landmark in the history of anime. It stands as a testament to the power of art, even in the darkest times, to transcend its origins and touch something deeper within us.